In India, a caregiver is Kartavya ki Murti and somebody who is going to sacrifice, must sacrifice their life. It has to do with your alternate karma, your past. So caregiving becomes extremely interesting to look at from the Indian context.
We speak about special needs children and we speak about the ecosystem, but we always tend to forget, the way the challenges for the caregivers.
मैं बहुत टाइम तक बहुत ही गुस्सा थी, सब चीजों पर गुस्सा थी कि मेरे बच्चे के साथ क्यों हुआ है और मेरे साथ ये क्यों हुआ है। अगर आप ऐसे सोचोगे कि मेरे पास ये नहीं है, ये नहीं है, ये नहीं है, और तो फिर आप हमेशा दुखी रहोगे। पर इफ यू कैन अप्रिशिएट कि मेरा बच्चा जो है वो इतना अमेजिंग है, और जो हमारी फैमिली यूनिट है, आई डोंट थिंक इतने क्लोज नहीं होते, करीब नहीं होते इफ इट हैड नॉट बीन फॉर हिम।
Today we're looking at special needs children and their caregivers. How do the caregivers cope? And a quick reminder before I move ahead to also subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jyotsna Mohan. And also a quick introduction to the guests. Mugdha Kalra is a former colleague, but she's also an autism activist, along with being a parent of a special needs child. Also on the show is Gopika Kapoor. She's a neurodiversity consultant and she's also an author. And I'm going to quickly just kick off these conversations and allow them to share their experiences.
We speak about special needs children and we speak about the ecosystem, but we always tend to forget, the way the challenges for the caregivers of special needs children. And both of you today have special needs children and are doing such remarkable work in that field as well. So Gopika, I'm going to kick this off with you. First, I just want to know a little bit about your child.
So my son is one of a twin. He just turned 18. He was diagnosed when he was 3. And the reason he was diagnosed was way back in the day, much before Mugdha's son Madhav was diagnosed. There was no Instagram. There was barely Facebook. There was people weren't talking about this. And there was that wonderful movie which came out, Tare Zameen Par, which talked about dyslexia and which listed down all the various kind of characteristics of the condition. And when that happened, I looked at it and I thought to myself, hey, this sounds like Veer. That's my son. And so when we got him diagnosed, I went in expecting a diagnosis of dyslexia. I came out with a diagnosis of autism. Since then, it's been a 15-year journey. So we started therapy, started working with him, doing various kinds of things, trying to figure out what exactly would work with him. But then somewhere along the line, I felt that I need to do something to give back. And so that's when I started working as a therapist at Umeed Child Development Center, where he was diagnosed, and worked there for 10 years. And then being a very avid reader, as well as somebody who studied journalism and someone who loves writing, I thought, there's nothing that I can relate to in the Indian market. And so that's how Beyond the Blue, my book, was born. So now I currently focus on a lot of the adult population, trying to help them to kind of get jobs and to train corporates on how they can employ adults.
For anybody who is looking for the Indian experience, for anybody who is trying to make sense of the diagnosis for a new parent, Gopika's book is what one needs to go to, which when I read her book, it was speaking to me as if it was my story. That is one book that I recommend to all parents in India and otherwise, where in India, a caregiver is Kartavya ki Murti and somebody who is going to sacrifice, must sacrifice their life. It has to do with your alternate karma, your past life, and आप उसको ही deal कर रहे हो,
especially the mom,
So,
especially the mom.
So
Yeah.
caregiving becomes extremely interesting to look at from the Indian context. We also come from a big place of privilege, both of us, where we had the opportunity of giving the best to our children, had intervention available in the cities that we were at. And so it was only right to sort of come back and talk to other parents about what they can be, what they could be going through at this point in time. And that's how pretty much my journey started. Both of us, I think, have taken our own time to deal with the diagnosis. But once we sort of got to terms with it, we accepted it, then our own healing journeys also started as caregivers. If you have had an idea of what life is going to be with a child before the child was diagnosed, it will take you time to come to terms with it. And until and unless you start building your own life, this journey can be very difficult.
Gopika, you speak about, the diagnosis, and it all begins right from the diagnosis. Now, it's fascinating. I mean, you've got one twin who is neurotypical, the other one. How was that? Just balancing that out.
Challenging, but fun, I guess, in a way, in its own way. So I think from the minute we found out we were having twins, we were very conscious of the fact that they will have to live their own identities and we'll have to kind of divide time between them. Again, our sense of privilege just comes in everywhere. It is, I'm privileged to be able to have worked part-time. I was privileged to be able to not have to worry about not having to kind of put a meal on the table, so I could spend that time with my children. With my daughter, it was interesting because I really call her my absolute blessing. She's like my wise old owl. Growing up, there were bits where it was very hard because they're twins. You see, they're the same age. So she couldn't understand why this brother of hers, who's the same age as her, exact same age as her, is like some things we are letting go when he does them. Some things that he does are just kind of overlooked, and why she has to put up with some things that he does. And so I remember we sat her down when she was 8 years old and got into this whole explanation about, his brain is wired differently and this is what it is and stuff like that. And we were expecting tears and kind of like an outburst. And she got up and said, okay, can I go and read my book? And I said, okay, fine. But clearly it went in somewhere because about a week or two later, somebody was picking on her brother. And she said, leave him alone. His brain is wired differently. So clearly that message went in somewhere, and it really kind of percolated through, because then she was doing presentations in school, and now I have a daughter who's going to go off to college to study psychology. And when I tell her, what do you want to do with psychology, she says maybe I'll do research on autism. So clearly that there was something which was which kind of went down over there. But it wasn't easy at all times. It was challenging. But at the same time, I think it was, there was that awareness at all times that we cannot expect her to be the adult. Now they are both 18. We need to start preparing for a future when we are not around. And I think we, both my husband and I, are very clear about the fact that if she chooses to live with him and he chooses to live with her, that's great. But he cannot become her responsibility. Because a lot of people have a child, a younger child, when they find out that there's an older child who's got a disability, will have a younger child specifically for this role, which I think is really not fair to that sibling. You can't expect them to look after that child. If they do it out of their own love and affection for this person, it's a different thing. But to kind of expect that and place that burden on a child is really, really not fair. We want to make sure that we provide for him during our lifetime, so that after we are not there, that he still has the ability to be able to enjoy his life independently.
Mugdha, and I really want you to just go through it once with me. From the time of when it was diagnosed for you, and to where you are today. How has the journey been?
Whenever this question is asked to me, and when I answer it, I also I also get a sense of how far I have come, right? And how I have changed and how life has evolved. So when we had Madhav, we were the poster family. I had a perfect job. We were one of the first few television stars at that point in time in India, where we had just launched news channels, and everybody was watching us, and we would get recognized on street. And then I got married to this wonderful man, and we made a life. In Delhi, we were both working in the industry. Then we had this beautiful child. How in the regular world it was called picture perfect, it was picture perfect. And then the diagnosis came. It took me a while to accept the diagnosis because I had no idea about autism, and I had not known autism before. And to understand that it is a lifelong condition takes a while. It means that your child is not going to be any different from this. He will learn to regulate. He will learn to live with this. You will learn to. Life is going to be different. Life is going to be beautiful, even with this. But it is a huge change. And it took me a while. And you go through the grief cycle. You go through the denial. You go through betrayal. You go through anger. You go through a lot of those emotions in order to come to terms with what is happening in your life. And I remember this was the time for the first time I took a sabbatical in my life, which was unheard of. So here I was, I had given up, I had moved cities. We had moved to Bangalore. My husband had taken an assignment there, and it was a blessing in disguise because Bangalore as a city is very, very evolved when it comes to therapeutic intervention for children. People are much more aware. And when we moved to Bangalore, one of the classic things that happened to me was I took a back seat and I said, all right, I'm going to be the therapy mom. And, I was driving Madhav everywhere, going from one doctor to another, from one therapy center to another. But a part of me was very, very uncomfortable about the fact that I wasn't making my own money. I wasn't independent. And Bangalore, India scene isn't evolved. It is Bombay, it is Noida, Delhi, where, we get our kind of work. I mean, post-COVID, lives have changed. Bangalore was very therapeutic for me as well because I had no help. I chose not to keep a full-time nanny. I was trying to understand Madhav completely. And, typically that is the age when you go through a lot of tantrums, meltdowns, etc. Because the child also is coming to terms with his sensory needs and outputs. And believe you me, the child also takes a while to trust you with his condition. If I am overstimulated, understimulated, she is going to understand. And so that period of taking that break, taking that sabbatical to understand my child, I think was very important. The other thing that I realized, which is a lot of us parents in cities do, which is we find our tribe, we go find our circles. But it comes only after you have accepted yourself that you are going to be open about your child's diagnosis. If you're going to live in your silence, if you're going to hide your child, if you're going to hide everything about your child, it's an invisible disability after all. It can very well be hidden, and we call it masking. And you may train your child to mask all his life, which is not at all good for anybody around him and for him as well. But if you are a parent who chooses to come out, if you're a parent who chooses to speak to the community, you will get a lot of help. There are a lot of support groups. There are senior parents. Then I realized that, I am fine with my child's diagnosis. He is growing happy, healthy, very spirited. Everything is fine with him. I have found this community also for him, right? But the biggest question that a parent has, what after me? If you ask a lot of parents who have had a child, first child with autism, it is not advisable before you do all the tests and before you figure out whether it is a genetic reason to have another child. And secondly, we are also very scared ourselves that, and because we also know, between Gopika and me, we would know so many parents who have two autistic children. And then it's difficult to imagine lifestyle, right? So I was like, if I need to find support for my child, I need to take him out of this village. And that's where my activism started of meeting more neurotypical children, meeting more people, talking to them about disability inclusion, talking to them about invisible disabilities, awareness, because 1 in 5 is neurodiverse now. That is written in stone. We run a movement called Not That Different, which is a movement led by children. Our partners, Gopika, are India's biggest platform for children under 17 for creative expression. They write, they brainstorm, they come together, and we said, let's go this route. Empathy, आपको बड़े होने पे हम नहीं teach कर सकते हैं, बच्चों को teach कर सकते हैं, because they have very innocent questions. So we started with schools. Now we are talking about. So we took out a comic book. We have started a movement called Everyday Inclusion. This month we are talking about how you can make flying inclusive. From getting into the airport to getting into a flight as a co-passenger, as somebody who is at the counters. So now everyday inclusion is what the biggest agenda of my life is. That this is my child's world as well, and he needs to be understood.
And Gopika, मुझे ये जानना है आपसे कि आपकी जर्नी की शुरू में when the diagnosis happened and you were a young parent, उस टाइम सबसे बड़े challenges
आई थिंक उस वक्त सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज यही था कि मुझे खुद अपनाना कि मेरे बच्चे को ऑटिज्म है, और बाकी के लोगों को इतना, यानी फैमिली सपोर्ट भी था मुझे, मेरे पास फाइनेंसेस की शॉर्टेज नहीं थी कि मैं थेरेपी अफोर्ड नहीं कर सकती थी, मुझे काम छोड़ना था और बच्चे के साथ रहना था, उसके वो भी प्रॉब्लम नहीं था। पर अपने आप की, जैसे मुग्धा ने कहा ना, जो जिंदगी होती है, यानी अब आपका एक बच्चा होता है और फिर वो इस बच्चे को डायग्नोसिस होता है और आपको ऐसे लगता है कि बच्चा दूसरा बच्चा ही हो गया है, मेरा बच्चा नहीं रहा है, क्योंकि वो डायग्नोसिस का जो उस पर जो हाउ शुड आई पुट इट, इट्स ऑलमोस्ट लाइक अ क्लोक दैट दिस चाइल्ड हैज वॉर्न। मैं बहुत टाइम तक बहुत ही गुस्सा थी, सब चीजों पर गुस्सा थी कि मेरे बच्चे के साथ क्यों हुआ है और मेरे साथ ये क्यों हुआ है। तो उस वक्त बहुत सारा गुस्सा आता है, उदासी भी बहुत होती है, और फिर हम ऐसे यानी ऑलमोस्ट दूसरे बच्चों के साथ, दूसरे लोगों के साथ अपनी जिंदगी की तुलना करने लगते हैं। इन माय केस मैं बहुत बिटर बन गई थी। आई हैड बिकम वेरी वेरी हार्ड, वेरी बिटर, वेरी एंग्री ऑल द टाइम। और धीरे धीरे क्या हुआ कि ये जो बिटरनेस चली गई, और ओवर टाइम आई लर्न्ड टू अप्रिशिएट कि मेरे पास क्या है, और मेरा बच्चा जो है उसे अप्रिशिएट और एक्सेप्ट करना मैंने सीखा। और जब वो हुआ, देन थिंग्स टर्न्ड अराउंड, एंड ऑनेस्टली आज रोज मैं उठती हूँ, आई एम ग्रेटफुल फॉर द लाइफ आई हैव, आई एम ग्रेटफुल फॉर द चाइल्ड आई हैव, फॉर द चिल्ड्रन आई हैव। कि अगर आप ऐसे सोचोगे कि मेरे पास ये नहीं है, ये नहीं है, ये नहीं है, और तो फिर आप हमेशा दुखी रहोगे। पर इफ यू कैन अप्रिशिएट कि मेरा बच्चा जो है वो इतना अमेजिंग है, और जैसे कि मुग्धा ने कहा कि हाउ फार वी कम, इतना कुछ हमने सीखा है, उसने हमें सिखाया है। आई थिंक ही हैज बीन आवर बिगेस्ट टीचर। I don't think we would be as bonded as we are. हम इतने close नहीं होते, करीब नहीं होते, if it had not been for him.
But Mugdha, जैसे गोपिका ने कहा, all these emotions, it's not unfair to have these emotions, नहीं?
It is very, very normal. And I think that is one thing that a lot of people do not understand. कि आप इन सारे स्टेजेस से आप जाओगे, ये सारी चीजें आपके साथ होंगी, ये सारी चीजें दूसरों के साथ भी होती हैं। It is collective humanity. आप अनोखे नहीं हो, आप अलग नहीं हो. You do everything, and it is absolutely all right.
Yeah.
It is. So one thing that people have to understand is that this cycle, you will go through this cycle, and it is all right. मैं अपने stress को इतना internalize कर लेती हूँ, क्योंकि रोज की बात होती थी, रोज कोई meltdown हो गया, रोज ये situation change नहीं होती है. आपके कोई ना कोई, जैसे बच्चा स्टिमिंग कर रहा है, आफ्टर अ व्हाइल यू गेट यूज्ड टू सीइंग योर चाइल्ड स्टिमिंग, व्हिच इज द सेल्फ स्टिमुलेटरी बिहेवियर। जब तक आपकी मोटी चमड़ी नहीं होती है, आप जो है आप कहीं बाहर नहीं जा सकते हैं, आप कुछ नहीं कर सकते। जब आपको ये पूरी तरीके से आप प्रिपेयर्ड होते हैं कि यार टू हुड्स टू द वर्ल्ड, my child is like this and I will enjoy, I will travel, I will do whatever I have to do with my child. लेकिन उससे पहले का जो टाइम होता है ना, जब आप अपने आप को जज कर रहे होते हो, जब आप सोचते हो कि लोग मेरे बारे में क्या सोच रहे हैं, लोग मेरे बच्चे के बारे में क्या सोच रहे हैं, लोग मेरी तरफ देख रहे हैं, और ये सारी चीजें ना आप जब इंटरनलाइज करते रहते हो ओवर अ रेगुलर बेसिस, तो ऐसा नहीं होता कि आप रोज रोते हो, ऐसा नहीं होता कि आपके रोज मेल्टडाउन्स होते हैं. ये क्या होता है ना, ये आपकी बॉडी में ना कंधे का दर्द बन जाता है, ये आपकी बॉडी में नीज का पेन बन जाता है, ये आपकी बॉडी में बैक एक बन जाता है. Body keeps a score. There's a book which is called Body Keeps the Score, and body actually keeps the score. So I always tell caregivers, I always tell moms and dads that, whenever you are feeling aches and pains and you are losing sleep, you are not eating properly, these are all signs of you internalizing stress. These are all signs of depression as well. One thing I always tell parents, and I always urge their pediatricians who they speak with, their therapists and counselors that they go to, the first thing I tell them is, बच्चे को थेरेपी सब्सक्राइब करने से पहले सबसे पहले ये देखो कि क्या पेरेंट्स एक थेरेपिस्ट के पास जा सकते हैं कि नहीं. Can they afford therapy? If they cannot afford therapy, then you have to hand them the diagnosis very, very sensitively, very, very carefully. Because every person is not resilient. सारी न्यूरोडाइवर्सिटीज में कहीं ना कहीं जेनेटिक प्रीडिस्पोजिशन है. अगर एक जेनेटिक प्रीडिस्पोजिशन है तो ये हो सकता है कि आपके जो पेरेंट है जिसका बच्चा हुआ है, they themselves may be living with an invisible disability that they are not aware of. So the first thing that I always tell for a caregiver is meet a psychiatrist, meet a family therapist. Very regularly meet people who can tell you that it is absolutely all right to go through the emotions that you are going. We have seen suicide, we have seen divorces, we have seen a lot of things that have taken an ugly shape within our caregiving community. Now these are very real things, and these are things that are happening around us in big cities, because caregiver की mental health के बारे में बहुत कम सोचा जा रहा है, और ये caregiver को assume किया जाता है कि this caregiver is perfect और इनको कोई परेशानी नहीं हो सकती है. Whereas the process of caregiving can lead to depression. The process of caregiving can also lead to self-diagnosis of a mental health issue. We also urge people to donate sessions for caregivers, and that's the reason why मैं बहुत ज़्यादा उन लोगों के साथ काम करती हूँ जो कि थेरेपी नहीं अफोर्ड कर सकते. So a lot of my work is with parents because they are my tribe. But my always first question to them is, how are you doing? Are you doing all right?
How autistic children can socialize, and I want you to add that along with the fact that you obviously take your child out into the public. Okay, even when he was younger, but did you kind of experience this whole pushback from society at any point?
Early on, when I took my son to my developmental pediatrician, and I told her, I said, okay, what can we do? We're doing therapy, we're doing this, ye itna sab kar rahe hain. She had 3 words to say to me. She said, expose, expose, expose. उसे जितना बाहर ले जा सकते हैं उतना ले जाओ. शादी में जा रहे हैं, ले जाओ. मॉल पे जा रहे हैं, ले जाओ. सब्जी खरीदने ले जा रहे हैं, ले जाओ. जहां पे भी आप ले जा सकते हैं, ले जाइए. यानी आप सब्जी खरीदने जाते हो या फ्रूट खरीदने जाते हो, आप एक एप्पल उठाओगे, आप उसको नाम सिखाओगे एप्पल, आप उसको कलर सिखाओगे, आप उसको शेप सिखाओगे, तो इतना सारा तो बच्चा सीख रहा है, राइट? तो ये सब चीजें आप सिखा रहे हैं बच्चे को. एंड मोरओवर, मोर इम्पोर्टेंटली, बच्चा सीख रहा है कि हाउ डू यू इंटरेक्ट विद अदर्स. इट इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट, पर आपको बच्चे को बाहर ले जाना पड़ेगा. हमारे बच्चे जो होते हैं, स्पेशली व्हेन दे आर यंगर, वो अपनी खुद की दुनिया में रहते हैं, तो उनको कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता है कि किसी ने क्या कहा है, कुछ हुआ है, कुछ नहीं होता है. पर एज अ मदर, इतना रोई हूँ. आई रिमेम्बर वेरी क्लियरली, एक कुछ रनिंग क्लास था और वहां पे कोच, मैंने कहा कि मेरे बच्चे को प्लीज आप एनरोल कर दीजिए, और मैंने कहा कि उसे ऑटिज्म है, और वो बोला ठीक है आप ले आओ. और आधे क्लास के बीच में, आई रिमेम्बर आई वाज स्टैंडिंग ओवर देयर, आधे क्लास के बीच में वो कह रहा है कि यू विल हैव टू टेक योर चाइल्ड, मैं नहीं कुछ कर सकता। और मैं घर जाके इतना रोई थी बिकॉज आई फेल्ट कि अभी क्या होगा। कट टू टुडे, वो अपने आप खुद इस समर में खुद अपने आप कैंप पे जाने वाला है। बर्थडे पार्टी में ले जाओ, वो आई रिमेम्बर वो गया अपनी प्लेट के साथ, ऐसे प्लेट लेके गया और बहुत स्वीटली जाके गया, और उसने कहा, कुछ लड़के बैठे थे, प्लीज कैन आई सिट हियर, और अपने सिंग सॉन्ग वॉइस में ऐसे ऐसे यानी गा के जाके वो बोला, और वो बच्चे बोले गेट आउट, यू कांट सिट हियर, यू नो। और फिर कुछ बोलने लगे कि वो पागल है या कुछ ऐसा कुछ, और लिटरली वो बर्थडे पार्टी के बीच में मैं रोने लगी और मुझे वहां से भागना पड़ा। तो बहुत सारी चीजें हैं, उसे कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ा, उसे बिल्कुल फर्क नहीं पड़ा एट ऑल, पर मुझे इतना लगा कि मेरे बच्चे को ये क्या हो रहा है। सो ऑल दीज इंस्टेंसेस दे जस्ट एक्ट लाइक अ लेयर, और एक करके इट बिल्ड्स अप टिल अल्टीमेटली यू रीच अ पॉइंट वेयर यू से उनको बोलने दो, क्या फर्क पड़ता है, मेरा बच्चा खुश है, मेरे बच्चे को कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ रहा है, मेरा आई एम लिविंग वेल, ही इज डूइंग वेल, ही इज डूइंग व्हाट ही हैज टू, ही इज अ गुड किड, इट डज नॉट मैटर।
You guys know of any good doctors for pediatric, for kids, autism doctors?
naidisha.org, nai-disha.org is a very, very good directory. You can go to Children's First. Children's First is a very big,
or even Action for Autism. Nidhi is
for
there,
autism.
so Action for Autism, और वहां पे आप जाइए, और आपको यानी अगर वहां पे भी अगर आपको नहीं डॉक्टर नहीं मिला तो आपको डेफिनेटली वहां पे आपको बताया जाएगा कि कहाँ पे जा सकते हैं आप।
You spoke about the healing journey, and ये जो बच्चे हैं, who were rude to your child, Gopika, they are at the end of the day they are learning or not learning from home. It's what the adults are leading by example.
Yes.
What can we do? I mean, do you think there is some kind of change in the last few years, Mugdha, or how can we bring the change?
I would say there is more awareness. Acceptance, perhaps not. And acceptance has to start from home, and acceptance has to start from parents themselves. So once you cross that acceptance bridge from your own house to your family, then to your friend circle, आपकी building जहाँ आप रहते हैं, etc. You have to be an advocate for your child. बिल आ रहा है उसमें तो अब मैंडेटरी कर दिया जाएगा कंपनीज को, they will have to hire people, they will have to make positions in their company. Schools will also start to have schools already have rights to education. There is already a mandate that you cannot refuse a child coming with invisible disabilities. So if you are a family that has recently been diagnosed with a child on the spectrum or with special needs, you will have to realign and reassess who is going to be your family, who are going to be your friends, who are these people who are going to be around you. So एक नए तरीके से आपको जिंदगी में उन लोगों को ढूंढना पड़ेगा, उन रिश्तों को ढूंढना पड़ेगा जो कि आपके लिए और आपके बच्चे के लिए इम्पोर्टेंट हो। दूसरी चीज, हम हिंदुस्तान में है जहाँ एक छोटे तबके से लेकर बड़े तबके का फैमिली जो है वो अपने लिए हेल्प जो है वो अफोर्ड कर सकती है। I have seen, I have a single mother coming to my house as one of my helps, and in her own little place where she lives, she has found somebody who takes care of her child, and she pays a little money to that person, and so everybody in this country will find a community. Do not be this person who says मैं सब चीज अपने आप करूंगी, मेरे को सब चीज अपने आप करनी है. Please don't do that. I mean, you have a right on your own life. If you want to live your life, then start taking help and you make a tribe of your own. फिर रास्ते खुलते चले जाते हैं, फिर आपको हेल्प मिलेगी, आपको बच्चे का फ्यूचर सोचने में भी उतनी तकलीफ नहीं होगी, क्योंकि आज तो कम्युनिटीज जो है वो टुगेदर, दे आर कमिंग टुगेदर एंड दे आर सेइंग ऑलराइट, लेट्स बिल्ड अ होम फॉर आवर चिल्ड्रन सो दैट आफ्टरवर्ड्स दे कैन बी टेकन केयर ऑफ. और एक्सेप्टेंस वहां पर हो सकती है इंडिया से बाहर, लेकिन जिस तरीके की जिंदगी आप अपने लिए, अपने बच्चे के लिए इंडिया में अफोर्ड कर सकते हैं, इंडिया में रह के कर सकते हैं, जहां इंटरवेंशन है, थेरेपी है, डॉक्टर्स है, एवरीथिंग इज देयर. इंडिया से बेहतर और कोई जगह एक्चुअली नहीं मिल सकती है वेयर you can also, as a caregiver, live your life, and your child can live a good life as well.
Hopefully, there's more attention given to caregivers. And Gopika, thank you so much for taking the time out today.
Always
Thank
good
you.
to
Thank
see
you so much.